I want to dive into a little bit about the first case study. So I've got two case studies here. This first client of ours is a painting contractor. A lot of you guys may know my background. I used to have a painting company and spent over 10 years in the industry before I started Elite Business Advisors here. And so this is kind of where the client was when we first met them. They were doing about $700,000 in revenue on an annual basis. They were always paying themselves. The bills were always being paid, but they never really felt like they were getting ahead. It was kind of always robbing Peter to pay Paul and always making payroll, basically kind of living paycheck to paycheck in their business, for lack of a better term. Their main thing they looked at was their annual profit and loss for their numbers. And they're like, oh, our net income looks great. All right, I guess we're doing pretty good. Didn't really have any data for their company. That's one of the first questions we always ask people is like, well, do you have any stats? Do you have any financial stats outside of your profit and loss? Do you, how do you get your work? A lot of those questions, they didn't really have a lot of answers for that, which is pretty typical for a lot of contractors. And then they also had 3 people on their management staff, 2 co-owners and another full-time person. And there was just a lot going on. They were kind of all over the place, didn't really know who was doing what. Everybody was doing a little bit of everything. And it was hard for them to really get a good understanding moving forward. So we dove in here. Kind of what we found the first few months is that they really weren't doing enough work each month to pay all of their bills and the salaries of 2 co-owners and their project manager. We figured out that a lot of months, unfortunately, they were paying out more than they were actually making about 90% of the months. So their cash flow was not in a good spot. We finally put all their profitability numbers together to know how much money they were making on their jobs. And their profitability was about 22%, which is pretty, I don't want to say pretty low, but it's definitely below average for the painting industry. Average is about 35 to 40%. And the worst part about that was they also didn't know if their lack of profitability was because they weren't estimating jobs properly or whether their employees just weren't producing them right. Again, they didn't have the data. At any point, they had about $60,000 to $70,000 in receivables, so jobs that were completed that they were waiting on payment of. And their deposits were pretty much being spent. So somebody that gave them a deposit for 4 months down the road, that money went right in. And honestly, I think that's the only reason they were able to kind of weather the negative cash flow that they had going. So that's kind of what we found. And here's kind of a picture where they're at about a year and a half, from that situation. So now they know that each month they need to do $60,000 in projects every month in revenue. Their last 7 months, they've ranged anywhere from 62,000 to 78,000. So we've tried to simplify that down and just say, if you can focus on this number of revenue and keep all your other costs pretty consistent, everything else will fall into place. Their business has had a monthly cash flow of $4,000 or more. And that's after paying the owners, after paying literally everything. 6 of the last 7 months, total has been about $35,000 in total over the 7-month period. Their profitability is literally doubled. It's at 44% average for projects. And honestly, the last 6 months, it's been 60% for the entire month. All their jobs have averaged about 60%, which is just absolutely amazing. And I can't take all the credit for that. Obviously, we're just helping them along the way. They're still the ones doing all the work. So the receivables haven't been above $20,000 at any point over the last 4 months. And generally that number is less than 10,000 aside from some bigger projects. And the best part for me, which is exciting, is all their deposits for future jobs are set aside in a separate account. So we were able to finally get them on a path to where all that money is set aside and that those deposits don't get moved over into their main checking account until the job gets started or they bought materials or something like that.